Assalamualaikum and very good afternoon. MMU Postgraduate Virtual Open Day 2021 is here live. For today's topic, we have a lunch talk with two titles. The first one is Probable Security and the second one is the Fourth Industrial Revolution, the Global Revolution in Science, Technology and Society. Log your date for our MMU Postgraduate Virtual Open Day from the 23rd to the 29th August 2021 on our MMU Facebook page and MMU YouTube channel. There will be many informative and interesting webinars and lunch talk taking place here during the MMU Postgraduate Virtual Open Day week. So don't miss the opportunity to register with us now. Just go on to our website and click register on the postgraduate session. Start Your Next Education chapter with us. MMU Postgraduate Virtual Open Day will be hosted by me, SB, Mustafa Muzair, a lecturer, academic counselor, happening live now. Save your date and time with us. So to get into the conversation today, let me invite our first speaker, Dr. Chin Jia Jin, who is a senior lecturer at Faculty of Computing and Informatics. He'll be talking about his title, Probable Security. Before we start, let me give a brief overview on Dr. Chin. Chin Jia Jin has spent more than a decade researching theoretical public key cryptography, specializing in entity and message authentication scheme, such as identification and digital signature scheme, with particular interest in designing schemes that do not require certificate. To start the topic, let me call Dr. Chin Jia Jin from FCI, Faculty of Computing and Informatics. Over to you, Dr. Chin, with your presentation.
Hi, welcome to MMU Postgraduate Virtual Open Day. My name is Chin Jia Jin, and here I'm going to give a short talk about probable security. Now, probable security is much related to cryptography, and so since cryptography is quite well known to everyone, that involves encryption, I'm going to start off this talk by looking at the symmetric key encryption model. I'll take into account that this is a model, which means that a lot of details are left out. It basically shows how encryption works between a sender and receiver, Alice and Bob. And how it works is Alice has a message in the form of a plain text. She will send it through an encryption algorithm that is encrypted with a key that she shares with Bob. Once this encryption is complete, a ciphertext is produced that looks like gibberish, and this ciphertext is sent through an insecure channel to be received by Bob. Bob, having the same shared key, will run the ciphertext through the decryption algorithm, recovering the plain text that contains the message that Alice wants to communicate and is able to read and understand it. Now, as you can see, this model makes several assumptions. First assumption is that the key exchange is done securely, and so it doesn't touch on how Alice and Bob exchanged the key in the first place. The second assumption is that in the insecure channel, the adversary is only allowed to eavesdrop on the message. It says nothing if the adversary stops the ciphertext from being transmitted or is able to change certain characters in the ciphertext. All these assumptions are made on the adversary's capabilities. Now, keep in mind this model because we will be using this when we revisit the probable security section. Now, if we take this model and instantiate it with a cipher, which means we define the encryption algorithm and the key as to in detail of how they work, one of these examples would be the MonoAlphabetic substitution cipher. And in this classical cipher, how it works is you have the key, which is like the yellow table there, which is a one-to-one mapping between every character in the 26 alphabets to a random character of choice. And so A is randomly mapped with K, B is mapped to C, and if you see a plain text character that is on the top, you replace it with the one at the bottom. So that's how the MonoAlphabetic cipher encrypts information. This key, which is the yellow table mapping here, is shared between Alice and Bob. And so if Alice wants to encrypt the message Friday to Bob, she will take F and replace it with M, as you see from the table here. This F here is replaced with M, this R is replaced with J, I is replaced with D, and so on until she gets this MJD-SKZ, which is sent over to Bob. Bob decrypts it by going the bottom way up. Okay, so if she sees M here, he has to look for M, which would be here, and then replace it with F to recover the F. And so as he does this, he's managed to decrypt the message and have Friday as the plaintext. So there's a key assumption that we're making here, in that there is no better algorithm that exists than brute force, which in this case is not true. If you look at the brute force search time, if you have a key size of 32 bits, which means you have a combination of 2 to the power 32 keys, this totals up to 4.3 times 10 to the power 9, which is 4.3 billion keys. If you can do one decryption per microsecond, this will take 35.8 minutes. If you can do 1 million decryptions per microsecond, which is quite reasonable for today's standards, then it will only take 2.15 milliseconds to run through at every possible key combination and find the decryption for the ciphertext, even without knowing the proper key. If you increase the key size to 56 bits, it will take roughly 10 hours. If you're using 128 bits, which is current day AES security, then it will take 5.4 times 10 to the power 18 years. Okay, at 168, it will take 5.9 times 10 to the power 30 years. So as the key sizes increase, so does the difficulty of brute force searching. So if you have 26 characters, as we saw before, it will take 6.4 times 10 to the power 6 years, which is about 6.4 million years. But this is assuming brute force search time. This is not true for the MonoAlphabetic substitution cipher, because we have a better way in exploiting the language characteristics. And so if you have natural language frequencies, as you have the histogram on the top, that shows that the character E is the character that is most used in the English language. If you see a ciphertext that is commonly found in if you see a character that is the most commonly found in the ciphertext, you probably want to replace that with E first as a start. Then you take the second most frequent character and replace it with the T. Okay, combining certain frequencies for digrams and trigrams, you might want to change the most common ones to THE or ING as a trial and error. So by doing this trial and error substitutions, you can easily break the code if you have a long piece of ciphertext. So what is not done well here is according to the general design principles of Katz and Lindell in their textbook Modern Cryptography. One of the key principles that we have to adhere to is that of Kirchhoff. Kirchhoff is a mathematician in 1800s that made a remark that the algorithms should be made public. How you do the enciphering should be well known. Only the keys are kept in secret, and the keys should be large enough to have sufficient key space. The last one is that we have to assume that there are computationally hard problems that exist, such as factoring and discrete logarithms. Now this is an assumption, and we'll talk about why assumptions are used in the second principle. So Katz and Lindell, they present 3 principles for designing modern cryptographic schemes. First of all, we look at definitions, and definitions should be rigorous and precise. Okay. We have to define these essential prerequisites for the design, use, or study of any cryptographic primitive or protocol. By design, we have to define what is needed first, then only we begin the design phase of the protocol. By usage, we will have to see what security is desired, have to define it properly, then verify whether a given encryption scheme suffices or you need to use something else. And in the study, once you have all the definitions down, you have to compare 2 schemes in order to check which is more efficient and which is more secure using these precise definitions. So going back to the MonoAlphabetic cipher, let's look at how we would formalize the desired notion of security for private key encryption. Is an encryption scheme, is it secure if no adversary can find the secret key when given a ciphertext? So if you define security this way, it's quite obvious that you don't have to find the entire 26 key mapping for the MonoAlphabetic cipher in order to break the scheme. So this definition is definitely not enough. If you go one step further and show that the scheme is secure if no adversary can find the plain text that corresponds to the ciphertext, is that enough? So this is not enough as well, because we don't have to look for the entire plain text. We only have to substitute enough characters until we can find some meaningful information. And so we come to the third definition, where no adversary can determine any character of the plain text that corresponds to the ciphertext. But if we use this, again, it's not sufficient because the language might change. It might not even be using characters. It might be Sanskrit or Chinese or Jawi. So if the language changes, does the cipher change as well? So obviously that's not enough of a definition. And so in step 4, we would want an adversary that cannot derive any meaningful information about the plain text from the ciphertext. This looks like it's sufficient, but if you notice something very odd standing out from this definition, that would be the subjective word meaningful here. So how do you measure meaningful? It's not precise, it's not objective, you cannot measure it. And so this requires a little bit more tweaking to get the final definition, which is that no adversary can compute any function of the plain text from the ciphertext. And by defining any function, we have a measurable method of defining the function, which obviously the MonoAlphabetic cipher does not fulfill, because the function of frequency counting would be insufficient for security. Okay, so proper definitions are required, but even with the final answer here, we need to define what is the attack model, in which we have to consider two factors: what is considered to be breaking the scheme, and what is the power of the adversary trying to attack it. In summary, a cryptographic scheme for a given task is secure if no adversary of a specified power can achieve a desired specified break. The definition of security here never assumes anything about the adversary's strategy, only what it's capable of. So it doesn't assume whether the adversary substitute E first or substitute G first. It doesn't assume all that, it just assumes that it can do frequency analysis. And if that's the assumption, then again, the MonoAlphabetic cipher is not secure in this context. Security must be guaranteed for any adversary within the class of adversaries with specified power. Usually this is polynomial time, and this definition of the security will then provide a mathematical formulation of a real-world problem. There are downsides to this principle though, because it doesn't capture everything. For example, if you define security in this sense, sometimes side channel attacks and leaks are not considered. For example, smart cards that are susceptible to power analysis. And so if you do the proof like this, there is nothing wrong with the proof. It's just a mismatch between the definition that you put and its real-world implementations. And so there is this gap between practitioners and theorists, because theorists define everything. Practitioners just want something that works. And so there's a gap between this definition and what is actually implemented. This is why research is important, and it's important to expose industry practitioners to these principles so that the gap can be bridged between theory and practice. Of course, the researchers should do well not to impose too crazy assumptions or too difficult definitions that are impossible to achieve. And so back to the definition of adversarial powers, we have a few categories for encryption schemes here. We have the chosen only ciphertext only attack, which is how we attack the MonoAlphabetic cipher, because we only have access to the ciphertext and then we do our frequency analysis only on the ciphertext. We may have a known plaintext attack, where the attacker has a few sets of plaintext that are stolen and is able to do corresponding relationships check between the plaintext and the ciphertext. There is the chosen plaintext attack, where he has access to an encryption machine, and the most powerful one would be a chosen ciphertext attack, where he has access to a decryption machine. He can feed the decryption machine any ciphertext that he wants and then observe the decryption. So as you can see, all four definitions still have the key secure. The adversary still has no access to the keys. He only has access to encryption and decryption processes, even for the last two. For other primitives like signatures and identification, we have other definitions of adversarial powers, namely existential forgery for chosen message attacks for signatures, and impersonation under passive or active attacks for identification schemes. So principle 2 will involve assumptions. When the security of a cryptographic construction relies on an unproven assumption, this assumption must be precisely stated and should be as minimal as possible. Assumptions are not good, especially in cryptographic context or security context, because assumptions just mean uncertainty. When you have uncertainty, it means that bad things might happen. And so you would want to keep the uncertainties as minimal as possible by defining the assumptions as tightly or as minimally as we can. And this assumption will then be further used in the facilitation of the next part, which would be the rigorous proof of security. So when we put the definition and the assumption together, then we can do a reduction in the form of a proof of security. And this reduction just reduces the attacker that is attacking the cryptographic scheme to one that solves the assumption that was made. So if the assumption is that problem X is difficult and you have a scheme pi, then you would want to define an adversary that is attacking scheme pi, that breaks scheme pi, and then using this break, offer up as a solution to this assumption that it can break the problem X. But since problem X is difficult to solve, difficult to break, therefore this adversary does not exist. So that's the gist behind the techniques of provable security and the principles behind it. Most of what security behind current cryptographic schemes is usually in ad hoc security. This, in essence, captures only one particular approach of an adversary towards a crypto system and how that crypto system is secure against it. So you're saying because adversary X wants to attack system Y this way, and system Y has this particular key in place, therefore X cannot achieve this. But if another attack comes along and it wasn't considered, or he may do the attacks interleavably, then it will not be captured by ad hoc security. So the three principles that we talked before constitute a rigorous approach to cryptography. Ad hoc approach is used in classical cryptography, and it may fail on any one of the above three principles or ignores them all. This is definitely not advised. So rigorous security is also known as provable security. This was introduced by Goldwasser and Micali in 1982, and is often known as a reduction to assumptions. So you can see principles 3 and 2 related together according to definitions as per principle 1. This is highly important research, usually ignored in practice, but hopefully the gap is bridging because more practitioners are aware of this area of study. So the ingredients of how to formulate a proof of security: first of all, you need a formal definition of the cryptographic primitive. Then you have to define the adversary, what he's capable of and what he's trying to achieve. You need to have correctness and soundness. Correctness just means that if you have the key, then the encryption or decryption should work correctly. Signatures should verify correctly. Protocols should be able to complete conversations correctly. Soundness, on the other hand, is if you don't have the key, then encryption should not be decryptable. Signatures should not be verifiable, and protocols should not be treated as acceptable if you don't have the proper corresponding key to facilitate the cryptographic process. So you put the first two together in the form of a simulation experiment. Because we want to put in the assumption here, or in the form of the problem instance, therefore certain parts of the simulation experiment has to have their processes replaced with oracles. So for example, an encryption process needs to be replaced with an encryption oracle for the adversary to interact with. So at the end of the simulation, the adversary will then show a break of the system, and then this break is used to solve the assumption. The final part of it is to show whether this is probable or not. And so there's a probability or advantage analysis showing if there is any gap between the adversary breaking the scheme versus the solution being found. Usually this comes in the forms of abort queries, which means that the adversary asks a question that the simulator cannot answer and therefore is forced to abort the simulation. And so this is the tightness of a security proof. The less aborts, or the smaller the chance of aborting, then it's a tighter security. So before we look at the details, I do want to introduce the random oracle first. This was introduced by Bellare and Rogaway in 1993, and it's an idealistic hash function. Usually it's used in security reductions where a hash function is replaced with this idealistic version. And how it works is it will get a query for a hash function query, and if it's a existing query, that means it was asked before, it will produce the same answer. If not, then it will generate a new answer that is totally random and uniformly distributed. Now, random oracles cannot exist. It's impossible for them to exist due to the VisionWhole Principle, which just says that if you have an unlimited amount of messages that can come in, but only a finite amount of digest that can be produced, for example, hash functions like SHA-2 have only 256 bits of message digest space, and so you're bound to have some collisions. It will not be uniformly distributed. For example, if you have 10 pigeons, which will represent the inputs here, and 9 holes, which will represent the outputs, you definitely have less holes than pigeons. And so one of the holes will have 2 pigeons, which will be more than 1, causing this distribution to not be uniform. And so this random oracle model is mainly used in the simulations to replace the hash functions, allowing a mapping between the solution of the hard problem to the adversary breaking the scheme. So moving on to the general form of chosen plain text attack is where an adversary plays a game with this challenger. This challenger is supposed to mimic the real-world encryption environment by giving the adversary the keys, the public key, if it's a public key scheme, or nothing at all if it's a symmetric key. And the adversary is given the chance to ask encryption queries of any message of his choice. At the end, where he shows how to break the scheme, he has to choose 2 messages, M0 and M1. C will then flip a bit B, and if B is 0, it will encrypt M0. If B is 1, it will encrypt M1. He will send this ciphertext back to A to be able to decide or distinguish which message was encrypted. And so if this is a secure scheme, then it can only succeed with probability half plus some minor lucky chance that he manages to break the scheme or make a lucky guess at the correlation. So this will describe the simulation of this distinguishability under chosen plain text attack, or INDCPA for short. If you look at the case study here, we have hash L-Gamal, where we can reduce the hash L-Gamal to an attack on the hash Diffie-Hellman assumption. Don't use textbook L-Gamal. Is shown to be insecure by Bonnet in the year 2000. And most of this material, it comes from his course from Coursera. And so the hash Diffie-Hellman assumption assumes that you have a group G, which is a finite cyclic group. Cyclic group just means that within that group, every element, once exponentiated with a certain number, will map to another element in the group, in modular operation, of course. And you have a hash function that takes in 2 group elements and maps it to a random number k. And so the hash Diffie-Hellman assumption states that it is not possible to distinguish between 2 tuples, the first one being given G, GA, and G power B, and the last element is the hash of GB and GAB. This distribution is indistinguishable from the randomly chosen number R, where R is from the key space. And so that's the assumption being made. The scheme for L-Gamal itself is on top, where you choose a generator G, you choose a number A, integer A, and then you set the public key as G and H, where H is G to the power A, and the secret key is the number A here. So to encrypt, select a nonce B, calculate the key for the private key encryption scheme, which is E here. Calculate the key as the hash of G to the power B and H to the power B. Once you have the key calculated as this hash value, use it in the symmetric key encryption scheme E, and encrypt the message M with it. So this will produce the ciphertext GB and C. To decrypt, remember that the decryptor has the secret key A, and so to decrypt it, he will calculate the hash value of U and UA to get back the key, and then run this key and the ciphertext C through the decryption process to obtain the plaintext message M. So that's the formal definition of the scheme. To model the adversary's capabilities, since this is a chosen plaintext attack, the adversary is able to encrypt any message of his choice because the encryption oracle is public. That's why it's not modeled here in the adversary here. What is given to the adversary would be the public key G and GA, and the adversary then chooses between two messages M0 and M1, to which, depending on the bit flip of B, probably shouldn't use the bit flip B here because B represents the number B. So he flips a coin, gets one of the numbers, either 0 or 1. And if it's a 0, he will encrypt the message 0 using the tuple GB and G power AB. If it's a 1, then he will encrypt the message M1 using GB to G power AB if it was given the left side of the hash defilement assumption. Otherwise, if it's given the right one, where it's a random number, then it will just use the key K here, which is randomly generated, to encrypt the message M0 if the coin flip was 0, or M1 if the coin flip was 1. And it's shown that these four distributions are indistinguishable from each other, which is coming to show that Al-Gamal's IND-CPA security is equivalent to the hash defilement assumption under group G. So yeah, this is just a case study. Don't worry if you don't get it, but it's to roughly show you how we put the assumption, the definition, and the simulation together. Since there are no aborts here, therefore it's equivalent, which means the probability analysis is 1-to-1. If we were to increase the security to CCA security, chosen ciphertext attack, then in addition he will be given a decryption oracle, which then this would not suffice. And so further research is required because it's more challenging to solve for CCA security, to provide security against CCA opponents. For signatures, we have existential unforgeability under chosen message attacks, where the adversary, instead of an encryption oracle, is given a signing oracle. And at the end of the game, he must produce a message that was not queried before to the signing oracle, and also a corresponding valid signature that is verifiable by the challenger. The challenger will then use this to solve the hard instance problem. So the ones that I showed you are all simulation-based. There are other forms of provable security, namely in the game-based method by Victor Schupp. Game-based method is quite similar to simulation-based, except that it replaces part by part and does the probability analysis simultaneously as you define this simulation. So for simulation, it defines the whole thing, then only you do the probability analysis. The game-based approach will replace the oracles bit by bit, finally getting to the last game where it shows the difference between the advantage at the start and the advantage once it's related to the hard problem assumption. For the symbolic model, this assumes perfect cryptography, where decryption has no error, signing has no error. It's introduced by Dolev and Yao. It's mainly used for verification using software and for protocols where there are many steps involved. And sometimes it's just not humanly feasible to be doing the verification of a protocol using the pen and paper techniques of simulation-based and game-based approaches. And the final method will be universal composability by Carnegie, where it's assumed that these primitives will inherit security properties when they are fitted into one another in a composability model. There are some controversies as well. For example, another look at provable security by Koblitz and Menezes, as well as Random Oracles Revisited, where they critique the security of the random oracle that makes a scheme insecure once you replace the random oracle back with a normal hash function. And so provable security is required, especially if you plan to do cryptographic research. If you have anything on the top that you're making new cryptographic applications for, then you definitely need provable security as part of your argument to convince people that your scheme is secure. So if you join us, that's what you'll be doing here in MMU, doing cryptographic research, exploring new schemes, exploring new proofs. We don't work alone. We have a consortium, I guess, of research partners, mainly under the umbrella of the Malaysian Society of Cryptology Research. We partner with researchers from Utah, from EMOS, from INSPAM in UPM, in USM. Some of them we met under the MySeal initiative, where we were asked to evaluate ciphers that are safe for government use. My main role in evaluating these ciphers would be to look at the security proofs to see whether they are convincing and that they make sense according to the definitions that are given. So yes, it's a pretty exciting area. So we hope that if you have inquiries, please do make them to myself, and I shall see if I can answer your questions as best I can. So most welcome to join us. Thank you for your attention, and I hope you enjoyed the talk.
Thank you, Dr. Jia Jin. It was very detailed, in-depth research with a lot of challenges mentioned just now with part and components and areas that need to be improved on the topics. Okay, moving on, we have our second speaker from the Faculty of FIST, or Faculty of Science and Technology, Information Science and Technology. Let me pass the floor to Associate Professor Dr. Sohail Said. Before that, let me give an overview on Dr. Sohail, who is also Associate Professor at the faculty. Dr. Sohail's core research interest is in the area of biometrics, information security, image, signal processing pattern, recognitions, and classification. Till today, he has published over 40 research papers in the international peer review journal and also international conference, proceeding as a result of his research work. Let me pass the floor to Associate Professor Dr. Sohail Said. Over to you, Dr. Sohail.
Hi everyone, I am Dr. Muhammad Sohail Said, Associate Professor under the Faculty of Information Science and Technology, Multimedia University, Malaysia. Today I am going to talk about the fourth industrial revolution, the global revolution in science, technology, and society. First, I'll discuss about the first three industrial revolutions. The first industrial revolution, that is approximately start from 1765 to 1840, based on the introduction of steam power, rise of the factory system, machine tools, mechanical manufacturing, iron production, and so on. Next, second industrial revolution approximately start from 1870 to 1914, based on rapid industrialization, electricity, telephone, rail, and increased interconnectedness. And the next is third industrial revolution, start from approximately 1972 today, based on the use of or based on the rise of electronics, microprocessor, telecommunications, and automation. Next, look at a video clip that will give you the idea of Industrial Revolution 4.0.
When technology changes, the world changes with it. History has been witness to industrial revolutions that have taken place over the ages. The first revolution, triggered by steam power, proved that manpower is not the only way to progress. Machines joined muscle and reduced human effort. The second industrial revolution brought the world together with electric power. Leaps in technology paved the way to a new way of life and a global economy. Then, the computer changed everything. Information technology and electronics led the third industrial revolution. Workplaces became smarter, technology got personal, and communication went mobile. The fourth industrial revolution is bringing together physical and digital worlds across industries to create an interconnected global value chain. Powerful technology, incredible connectivity, and unlimited information is available at your fingertips. Breakthroughs like machine learning, artificial intelligence, augmented reality, blockchain, robotics, and Internet of Things are rapidly changing the way we live our lives. The consumer is at the center of a connected ecosystem that delivers personalized needs at any time of choice. Business leaders across the world are gearing up to be a part of this ecosystem and be omnipresent for their consumers. New players enter and disrupt the game every day while constantly changing the rules. Organizations must change the way they work and strategize while adapting to the new world. It's time to leverage emerging technologies and seek collaborative opportunities to provide new and personalized experiences for everyone. Digitalization brings the world closer by erasing physical boundaries and breaking limits. It's important to keep up with the demands of a transforming world that seeks access to incredible opportunities in the most intimate of environments. Are you ready to lead the fourth industrial revolution?
So 3D printing is taking over the world, but how does it actually work? Well, it's quite similar to a normal printer, but then a little different. First, you don't put in an ink cartridge, but instead connect a spool of special printing material like plastic, rubber, or even metal. And you don't print boring text documents, but real-life models of what you've just made on your computer screen. Simply awesome. Right now, you can buy a 3D printer yourself and make complex 3D models with modeling software. But if you're not really a wizard with all that technical stuff, you can buy personalized 3D models online, like fancy toys, bracelets, or phone cases. Then send it to a 3D print shop nearby, choose a material, and pick up your own unique item. Sweet. In the medical world, they're developing 3D printers with special biological material. They're working on printing heart valves, ears, bones, skin, and even printed a small human kidney that can live for 3 months. It's just amazing. And hold on to your seats, they're developing a 3D printer that can print in space and are planning to print a moon base.
Artificial intelligence has been hailed as the next industrial revolution. People think they will change the world by providing smart solutions. Everything solved by AI. Customer service? Replace that with a bot. Data analysis? Replace it with unsupervised learning algorithms. Artificial intelligence has the capacity of understanding so much more than we do. The barriers of seemingly incomprehensible theories of science will be broken easily by the machines of the future. Physical problems, like we solved thousands of times faster than humans could, not only AI will optimize many of our systems, but also create new jobs. We don't know the rate at which it will do this. However, research firm Gartner further confirms the hypothesis of AI creating more jobs than it replaces, by predicting that in 2020, AI will create 2.3 million new jobs while eliminating 1.8 million traditional jobs. Just like AI took away the physical constraints of humans, AI will be able to take away our mental constraints. Just like machines whose strength is hundreds, if not thousands of times stronger than us, AI's intelligence will be hundreds, if not thousands of times smarter than us. What do you think are the most fantastical things yet to be solved by artificial intelligence?
Okay, now what is meant by Industrial Revolution 4.0? That means the fourth industrial revolution. The fourth industrial revolution refers to the fusion of technologies in the physical, digital, and biological domains, leading to the creation of new technologies that will drive in a new industrial era characterized by exponential growth, interconnectedness, increased human productivity, and blurring the lines between man and machine. Next slide. Okay, now look at the Industry 4.0 transformations. you look at the first industrial revolutions, that is based on the introduction of mechanical production, equipment driven by water and steam power. And the second industrial revolution based on mass production achieved by the division of labor concept and the use of electrical energy. And the third revolution, industrial revolution, based on the use of electronics and IT to further automate productions. And then now the fourth industrial revolution, that is based on the use of cyber physical system. Okay, now look at this transformation of Industry 4.0. If you look at here, the first revolution basically is we call the manual revolution, and the second revolution we call the electrical revolution, and the third revolution we call the automation, and the fourth revolution we call the intelligence. Next. Okay, what is meant by cyber physical system, CPS? A cyber physical system is a mechanism that is controlled or monitored, by computer-based algorithm. That means it will do the computations that is based on computer-based algorithms, and this is tightly integrated with the internet and its user, tightly integrated with the communication, that is called the internet and its users. Okay, now look at the industrial revolution 4.0 or fourth industrial revolutions. So these are actually the components of fourth industrial revolutions. You look at the components. Industry 4.0, one of the components. Then Society 5.0, reality, augmented reality or virtual reality 2.0, quality of life 4.0, education 4.0, and healthcare 4.0. Next. If you look at the manufacturing revolution, start from Industry 1.0 to Industry 4.0. The first industrial revolution I already discussed, we call the Industrial Revolution 1.0. Here the key change, what are the changes happened there? Introduction of mechanical productions, equipment driven by the water and steam power. And the second industrial revolutions, the key changes was introduction of mass manufacturing production, lines powered by electric energy. And the third industrial revolution, the key changes was happened, introduction of electronics, PLC devices, robots and IT to automate productions. And the fourth industrial revolution, the key changes is introduction of IoT, Internet of Things, and cyber physical systems driven by augmented reality and real-time intelligence. Next, if you look at the Industry 4.0, the technology versus the skills, development of new emerging technologies skills. So the first one is the mechanization, that is used mechanical system. The second one is electrification, that is used mechatronics systems. And third one we call digitizations, that means this is automated system. And the fourth one is cyber physical system, CPS, that is embedded ICT, communicate with physical things. Now look at a video clip that will give you the clear idea of Industry 4.0 revolution.
The fourth industrial revolution has begun, and you have the chance to be part of it. This isn't going to be like before. It's not about the steam that powered our factories in the first revolution, or the mass production model that dominated the second, or even the emergence of computer-driven systems from the third revolution that we're living in today. Industry 4.0 is about connectivity. It's an opportunity to radically change the way industry responds to the needs of society. As previous industrial revolutions were led by innovations in manufacturing processes and systems, The advancement of Industry 4.0 will be driven by a smart, interconnected, pervasive environment. The opportunities for disruption are huge, and those left behind will feel it acutely. There is still space for leaders of this new revolution to emerge, but the race has already started. Understanding what current leaders are doing will help you join them.
Okay, now look at the Industry 4.0 environment. Okay, if you look at the environment, you look at here, there is smart grid, a smart mobility, a smart logistics, there will be business web, social web, smart homes, smart buildings. That means all these are components are integrated with the Industry 4.0 revolutions. So there will be Internet of Things connected with Internet of Services, that will be connected with Internet of People, and also it will be connected with Internet of Data. Next. Okay, look at this slide. This is also talking about the Industry 4.0 environment. So that means if you think about the smart factory, that means this is CPPS, Cyber Physical Production Systems. In that case, you look at here all the components: smart mobility, a smart grid, a smart logistics, web business, business web, social web, a smart homes, a smart buildings. That means all the components of Internet of Things, Internet of Services, Internet of Peoples, and Internet of Data are interconnected. Next. Now here you look at this slide, that is basically the technologies of fourth industrial revolution. So there are 12 technologies. These are the very important technologies for fourth industrial revolution. Number one is we call the space technologies. The second one, AR and VR, augmented reality and virtual reality. Then next one is neuro technology. Next one, new computing technologies. Next, Internet of Things, geoengineering, 3D printing, advanced materials, artificial intelligence and robotic, biotechnology, energy capture, storage and transmission. And the last one is blockchain and distributed ledger. Next. The technologies that fueling the fourth industrial revolutions. So look at the technologies that fueling the fourth industrial revolutions. The first one is advanced robotics. Second one, big data and analytics. The next one is simulation. And the next one is virtual reality and augmented reality. The next one, digital integration. Next one is advanced manufacturing, cloud computing, and Internet of Things. Next. Okay, now look at the technology pillars for Industry 4.0. So there are 11 pillars of technological advancements. So we start with, for example, autonomous robot, then simulation and augmented reality, horizontal and vertical integration, industrial Internet of Things, IoT, cyber security, artificial intelligence, new business models, cloud computing, additive manufacturing, supply chain, and big data. So these are the, we call the 11 pillars of technological advancement. Now look at the workforce transformation in Malaysia. Malaysia also applying these 11 pillars of technological advancements in industries, in education, in the university, colleges, in the education sector, and also they are applying in territory. That means technical and vocational education and training, TVET. If you look at here, so all these 11 pillars of technological advancements, the Malaysia also using for their workforce transformation. Next, look at the Industry 4.0 framework. That means if you look at here, this 3D printing, then automations, all these things, Internet of Things, all are interconnected. So they integrate, then they analyze and visualize. So all components are integrated together, come up with the framework of Industry 4.0. Next, if you look at this slide, Healthcare 4.0, that is used for human society. That means that is applied to the healthcare of human society. So look at here, these are the components of Industry 4.0, Industry 4.0, revolution of Industry 4.0, Industry 4.0, Society 5.0, reality, augmented reality or virtual reality 2.0, quality of life 4.0, education 4.0 and the healthcare 4.0. So this area also very, very important for the human society, the better life of human society. Next, look at the fourth industrial revolution and healthcare for human society. So in that case, you look at here, the Industry 4.0 standards we call I4S, that employs technologies for automation and data exchange through cloud computing, big data, Internet of Things, forms of wireless internet, 5G technologies, cryptography, the use of semantic database design, augmented reality AR and virtual reality VR, content-based image retrieval, CBIN and so on. The advent of the fourth industrial revolution, which combines the physical, digital, biological spaces based on the information and communication technology ICT, is changing the paradigm of the healthcare industry. Next, okay, look at some tipping points of fourth industrial revolution for human society. Okay, if you look at the first tipping points, that is 10% of the people wearing clothes connected to the internet. So we are assuming that by 2025 that will be happened. Okay, 1 trillion sensor connected to the internet. The first robotic pharmacist in US will be developed, and if you look at the first 3D printing car will be in production. And then if you look at 90% of the population will be using smartphones, okay, and 90% of the population with regular access in internet. And the last one is the first transplant of a 3D printed liver. That means in that time we are expecting by 2025 the 3D printing liver will be developed. And this is very, very important for the betterment of human life. Next, so look at the fourth industrial revolution and its application in smart home healthcare for human society. So if you look at here, if this is the smart care home, so in the home, so there will be different kinds of technology will be used there. For example, home view, that will early emergency detection can be done by the home view. Secure intelligence, home view management will be there. And there will be the robot. We call the robot is Care O Robot 4. So this already is developed and that can be used for the household tasks, delivering products, cleaning, that can be used for cooking, support the patients and also the entertainment. The smart message chair, that will be heating systems, disease protection. With the chair they can protect the disease, body position sensing, so they can sensing the body position. All this will be done by the smart message chair. Okay, now smart clothes. If you look at the smart clothes, this will be integrated with activity sensors, respiration sensors. There will be respiration sensor. There will be hair sensors. All will be connected with the smart clothes. Next. Okay, look at here. This is the smart homes for elderly healthcare. This is one of the applications of Industrial Revolution 4.0. So this here, if you look at here, okay, there will be wearable sensors. That means you connect it with your body, and that can measure your ECG, your motion, your blood pressure, all these things. Then remote service platform, that will include the e-health and the maintenance, emergency call. Any problem happen, emergency call, we call the remote service platform. There will be home automation. There will be energy management. There will be home security systems. There will be environment monitoring, and there will be sleep monitoring systems, and also activity detections, fall detection. We call the smart mobility. So this will be the revolution for the healthcare industry for elderly people. Next. Okay, look at the fourth industrial revolution and its applications in healthcare for human society. So there will be the use of telemedicines. In telemedicines, so no need to come, the patient no need to come to the doctor. So they can go through the internet, they can connect it, they can see what happened to the patients, and based on the patient's conditions or disease, they can give the medicine. Okay. Then next one is the virtual home assistance. That means no need to go to doctor. So there will be apps, we call the virtual healthcare virtual assistance apps, that will guide you. That will guide you if you have any problem in health. So they will frequently ask you the questions. Based on your questions, they will give you the suggestions. Okay. Next, virtual reality and augmented reality. So if you look at the virtual reality, that is basically the user's perceptions of reality is completely based on the virtual informations. That means in virtual reality, the user's perception of reality is completely based on virtual informations. On the other hand, in the augmented reality, the user is provided with additional computer generated information that enhance their perception of reality. For example, in architecture, virtual reality can be used to create a walkthrough simulations of the inside of a new building. And in the augmented reality, that can be used to show a building's structures and systems superimposed on a real life view. Okay, so look at some of the pictures of virtual reality. They are used in the healthcare industry. Next, okay, look at the augmented reality. Some of the examples given augmented reality. So how they are going to use in the healthcare industry. And nowadays, augmented reality and virtual reality, they are combinedly used in the medical education and patient care. The vein can be seen using the augmented reality. That's all about the fourth industrial revolution. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Associate Professor Dr. Sohail. It was very in-depth explanations, details, and how Industrial Revolution 4.0 play a role in our life now and also in the future to come. Moving on with our show, I'm going to ask, we received a lot of questions here from our audience. The first question, let me pose to Dr. Chin. Hi, Dr. Chin. Okay, the first question for you, Dr. Chin, from our audience. What is the random oracle models and why it is so controversial?
So as I mentioned in the talk, the random oracle model is used to model hash functions within the security proof. But since it's idealistic, this thing cannot exist in the real world due to information theoretic constraints. So one of the controversies is that when it's replaced with an actual hash function, it will render a cryptographic scheme insecure.
I see. Okay. We received another question here for Dr. Sohail, but I think Dr. Sohail has to do something else. So Dr. Sohail will be replaced by Dr. Kalai Sari, right? Okay, Dr. Kalai, since you are there representing Dr. Sohail while he's gone. So may I ask you this question from our audience? Why are AI and fourth industrial revolution inseparable?
Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
Actually, AI forms the part of fourth industrial revolution, and it is actually fundamentally altering the way people live, the business operate, the context that the company, how they compete with each other. So when we talk about 2020, we have actually seen the advanced technology, advanced in the form of automation that is being adopted across many levels in the humorous sector, including medical, marketing, finance, supply chain, and all that. Okay, so now with the emerging technology, these have become a very key factor. Automation, how people communicate with machines and all that. So for that reason, for the automation and all that, AI play an important role in for IR. So without AI, it is impossible to have for IR.
Okay, Tom. Thank you, Dr. Kalai. Let me get back to Dr. Chin. Yeah, we have another question, Dr. Chin. With regard to the standard, what are the standard cryptographic assumptions in general?
Well, for assumptions, we have to assume that some mathematical problems are difficult to solve, such as factoring and discrete logarithms. That might not be true in the future when quantum computers come around. But for now, we have to assume that because it is still difficult, and then we have to build the security of a cryptographic scheme upon this foundation. So these assumptions are pretty much the foundation of the crypto that we use nowadays.
Okay, good answer. Let me ask a question for Dr. Kalai. I think this is going to be a last question because we are running out of time here. Okay, Dr. Kalai, how will industrial revolutions influence how we work nowadays?
Okay, the technology actually has become a key factor in how we are working. For example, after the pandemic, this one, okay, how we are working from home. For example, we are having the Google Meet and all that actually have transformed how we are working. Okay, so nowadays one of the key important thing is with machine learning and AI. Okay, it is transforming how we are working. Work have become more flexible. Employees are able to work or move more fluidly or easily across organization. They can work at a specific job and a specific project which is enabled with for IR. Okay, and also they can work at multiple roles within one place of employment. So work will involve more freelancing and all that. And work have also become more decentralized. That means the employees, they don't have to be in the same location. They can choose their city, then only choose the job. And also one of the key important thing how 4IR influence the way we work is nowadays work will require lifelong learning. Technology is continually changing. So human beings, they have to adapt to the new skills throughout the working life. Not only you depend or rely on what you have studied long ago, you have to keep on changing, updating your skills. So in this way, it has influenced how we work.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Chin, sorry, we have one more question. based on your presentation just now from the audience here, why don't we use Bluefish if hasn't been cracked?
Blowfish.
Yeah.
Okay. Blowfish, if I'm not mistaken, is from the same era as Rindale, which Rindale is now the AES symmetric key that is being used. It's not that Blowfish is not secure. It's just not been standardized. So it's pretty much a very good backup plan if ever Rindale is broken someday in the future. So yes, it's still quite possible that Blowfish can be used. There are some short key attacks that were found previously, but if the keys are long enough, then it should still be safer.
Okay, with that answer, we have come to an end. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us today webinars. Dr. Chin Jia Jian and Associate Professor Dr. Muhammad Sohail, and also Associate Professor Dr. Kala. Thank you for your sharing, your insight and expertise. For our audience, if you have any additional questions, would you like to connect directly with us? Just go to our webpage, MMU Postgraduate Virtual what do you call it, Open Day from the 23rd to 29th. Just go to our Facebook page and also our MMU YouTube channel. Just drop us a text, and then our team will respond back to you. You can either reach our our team directly using our contact information on the website. Thank you for your times, and have a wonderful rest of your day ahead. Thank you very much, gentlemen and ladies.
Multimedia University, because MMU is you, leading the digital future. Visit mmu.edu.my.